Jaylen Brown, on staying in Boston, said, "I don't know. As long as I'm needed, it's not up to me. We'll see how they feel about me over time, and I feel about them over time. Hopefully, whatever it is, it makes sense, but I will stay where I'm wanted. I will stay where I'm needed and treated correctly." This was not the answer you were hoping for if you were a Boston Celtics fan.
Look at the smile on his face.
And Dehls, I want you to go. I want you to go right after OG gives his spiel on Jaylen Brown.
Joe, stick right where you at, right there. Stay right there where you at. Stay with him, because I'm real interested to hear this.
So
no doubt
Dehls,
about that.
Jaylen Brown non-committal. It sounds like he's winking at coming to the Knicks.
Oh my God.
Sometime soon. So I'm just curious to know how you feel about Jaylen Brown not wanting to be in Boston, maybe.
Not wanting to be in Boston. That's how we're spinning this topic. Listen, when I first read the comments, obviously as a Celtic fan, I want to be a Celtic for life, right? That's what I want to hear Jaylen Brown say. But I understand, he's a tremendous player, one of the top 15, 20 players in the league. And he hasn't always been treated like that by the Boston Celtics organization. Now, I think a lot of that has been from other teams trying to get Jaylen Brown. When you go back and think about the days we were trying to acquire DeMarcus Cousins and Jimmy Butler and Anthony Davis. Paul George for a time, Kevin Durant. And this KD one really felt like the first time it felt real that the Celtics were significantly interested in trading away Jaylen Brown. All those other times, it more felt like when Danny Ainge was the GM at the time. You know how Danny Ainge, he wheels and deals. He's always going to call about players. And whenever they asked about Jaylen Brown, it felt like conversations never really got anywhere. So now this offseason, when you're coming off a finals appearance, Jaylen Brown's looking around and saying, hey, I just got to the finals, and now all of a sudden, this offseason, now is when you're seriously looking to move me. So I understand his comments, and I don't have a huge problem with it, right? He's a tremendous player. He should be in a place where he is respected, where he's wanted, where he gets paid, where he feels like he is going to be treated like the superstar he deserves. And I think Boston has done an okay job about that. And the hardest thing is that you have Jason Tatum there, who is the better player out of the two. I think the gap might not be as large as people think. They think that Jason Tatum has to be the best player every single night. When we see Jaylen Brown, especially post All-Star break, has been the better player for the Boston Celtics. Now, I think there's a few things that go into his future. The number one thing has to be if he makes All-NBA. If he's going to be a Supermax player, the Celtics are going to be able to offer $100+ million more than any other team out there. That's going to have a huge say in whether he stays in Boston. Even if he doesn't get All-NBA, they could still offer around $30-40 million with an extra year than any other team would. So I hope that Jaylen Brown realizes that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. When you want to go and win a championship, you're going to have to sacrifice, right? I know Jaylen Brown thinks he's a tremendous player, but you're going to need a second guy with you to always make that championship run. And the fact that he has Jason Tatum there, a guy that they seem to get along. I know the media likes to spin narratives, but they seem to get along. Jason Tatum said in his post-game press conference yesterday that when him, Brad, and Jaylen talked, that they kind of just said, we need you here. Like, we need you if we want to reach our goals. And Jaylen Brown also said after the Kings game, when he was asked about the comments, that a lot of times when writers have agendas, things could be spun in a different kind of way. And he went on to say, if I want to, I can clear those comments later. The Jaylen Brown still has another year on his contract. He wouldn't be a free agent until the 2024 offseason. But I'm hopeful, and I'm still 80-90% confident he's going to be a Celtic. I think Brad Stevens and him have a great relationship. The rest of the guys, him and Robert Williams, Marcus Smart, all have great relationships. I think they'll be able to get past this.
This is interesting because I want to preface what I say by saying that if he does make All-NBA, everything I'm saying goes out the water.
Wash, agreed.
Because they're going to extend him to a 5-year, $290 million contract. He's not turning that down. That's over $100 million raise over what any team can give him. So I'll say that.
Is that what it'd be? 5 years, 290?
Yeah.
What?
And the way eligibility works, you have to make All-NBA in 2 of the last 3 years or the last season. And so that's why it hasn't been extended yet.
That is stupid. That is,
and that's why he's betting on himself.
Money.
I want to say Jaylen Brown has come a long way. When he first got his contract extension, people thought it was overpay, and he very quickly put that narrative to rest because he performed at a big time level. But Dehls, the Celtics are not treating this man right, and I feel like he needs to go to a place that he's treated right. He was drafted with the 3rd overall pick. Only played 17 minutes a game that year. I mean, come on, he's 3rd overall pick.
He was a role player.
He was the most recruited player out of California since Jason Kidd. This guy was big time, right? His second year with Jason Tatum, they make a really good playoff run. He was one of the catalysts for it. Hayward and Kyrie come back, he's relegated to the bench. When he thought it was probably his time to shine, he wasn't able to shine. He was involved in every single trade rumor, whether it be Kawhi Leonard for Anthony Davis, and now, as of recently, Kevin Durant. And he had to call Brad Stevens and Jason Tatum on three-way and be like, yo, what's going on here? Because I don't know what direction the organization's going in. He felt betrayed. And I understand why he felt betrayed. I understand it's also Kevin Durant. But you see Ime Udoka left, and now somebody Jaylen Brown is very close with. The KD rumors, listen, I think he gets along with Jason Tatum great. I'm not going to say that he doesn't. I know that he does, and Jaylen Brown even said that, most importantly, we get along on the court. That's most important. But I feel like Jaylen Brown wants to be the man on the team. And what better way to be a man on the team than going to the Madison Square Garden and playing in front of New York Knicks fans? I think Jaylen Brown, if he leaves, that's the team that's going to go and pick him up.
You could have bet minus 1,000 odds this was going to be Joel's take.
Oh, no doubt.
He has to leave and go to the Knicks. Minus 1,000 odds.
It's not just walking out the door. It's walking out the door to the Knicks.
Yes,
it's not going to New Orleans. It's not going to Dallas. It's to the Knicks. Of course, Joe.
It's
absolutely
big time market. He's a big time name. He wants to be recognized as one of the best. He wants to.
So we all know I'm a huge Jaylen Brown fan. And it's acknowledged that I do believe that he is still the best Robin in the game. There is no better counterpart to your superstar than Jaylen Brown. He's shown that the last 2 seasons, specifically this season. And people have been a little hypercritical of his defense. I'm not too worried about that for the fact that it is the regular season. You lock in come playoff time. And I think that he's realized that in order to make an All-NBA team, you need to have the points, you need to have the statistics, and he's done that so far this season. Since the All-Star break, even last night he exemplified that, but prior to last night, he's averaging 27, 6 and 4 on 50% from the field, 40% from 3. He's been spectacular since the All-Star break. He has been the Celtics' most consistent player all season, realistically. Jason Tatum's their best player, no doubt about it, but you see his inconsistencies from time to time. Jaylen Brown is Mr. Consistent. Now, to talk about his recent situation with the Celtics and being, quote-unquote, non-committal, there's reasons for that. And I spoke about that briefly on last show. There is the fact that Boston fans are extremely critical of their players in more ways than one. Number 2, he is included in every single trade that you guys have already mentioned, especially for the fact of, hey, Kevin Durant's 34 years old. He is Kevin Durant. It's understood. But I just went to the championship with you guys. I was our best player in the NBA Finals.
Without a doubt.
And you constantly keep putting my name in these trade rumors to try and improve this quote-unquote roster when, again, I've been the most consistent player for us the past 2 seasons. There's a certain amount of disrespect that if I'm Jaylen Brown, that's how I'm feeling. And it's also the environment that you play in. I already mentioned the fans are super critical. The town itself is historically known for being extremely harsh on their players.
Not being the most progressive.
That's the word I'm looking for, without being too forward in my words. But you guys all understand what I mean by that. So if I'm Jaylen Brown and I have an opportunity to go prove that I am a true number 1 on another team, I don't want him to go to a situation like Charlotte where he's completely ruining his chances of winning an NBA championship. The Knicks is a solid team. I won't even mention my Lakers because that's not a realistic opportunity. But the Knicks are a solid team. You could probably throw in
The Mavs.
The Mavericks would be an amazing team. The Heat would probably be a very
Pacers.
interesting team. That is a very great name also because you do have a solid foundation already with Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner. You add Jaylen Brown to that mix. I think personally he would be the best player on that team. But I don't know if they're still contenders. I still see Jaylen Brown being able to have his most success in Boston because I think that he is the best number 2 in the game. And that's where he can thrive and he can succeed his most. I don't know if he could be a number 1 on a championship roster for the fact that he's still not that great playmaker. He would have to have another playmaker next to him. And really that's what it comes down to, his lack of playmaking, why I'm not over the moon about him being the number 1 on a championship team. Where Tatum, he still is a solid playmaker, a great scorer in his own right, great defender, but what holds Jaylen Brown back is that playmaking aspect. So listen, it's in his right. I definitely understand why he would feel disrespected. But if I'm Jaylen Brown, I feel like, hey, I'm in the perfect spot for me right now. Tatum and I are one of the best young duos in this league, arguably the best young duo in this league. And if we stay together for our entire careers, we could really make a run at a couple of championships.
Yeah.
OG, you take it.
Well, for Joe, and Joe can appreciate the football logic, how awesome was Alvin Harper when he was running with Michael Irvin? And then when he moved over and went to Tampa, did we just completely forget about him?
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen to Jaylen Brown, because as a number 2, a lot of times what we do is we kind of get these guys confused, where he looks good with this guy, he looks good in this system. Well, wait a minute, maybe he might be this good. When in reality, he's good for what's going on right now. I think Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are what Kawhi Leonard and Paul George were supposed to be. And in the process of them being that, they've excelled in the NBA. But what we also leave out is we leave out the fact that Jaylen Brown's numbers, they go down in the playoffs. And in the process of his numbers going down in the playoffs, his durability is in question too. I mean, he missed the playoffs. I think it was in 21. I think he missed the playoffs. This season, you mentioned that Jaylen Brown has been the most consistent. In fact, he's missed 11 games. Jason Tatum has only missed 5 games this year. Jason Tatum has actually been the most consistent player that they've had. Now, he hasn't shot the ball as well as people would like him to, and that's largely due to the fact that he plays on the long ball line and at the rim. There is nothing in between. And I've mentioned this in the past. I feel like once he gets that 12 to 15, that 15 to 18 consistently in his game, we're talking about a top 3 player for the next 5 to 8 years, no question about it. But in terms of consistency, him being in the lineup and him giving them an opportunity to win, he's the guy that they depend on the most, and he's been there the most. Now, with Jaylen Brown being a number 2, I don't understand why that's an issue. I mean, we talk about guys being awesome number 2s. I mean, Scottie Pippen, the downside to being a number 2 is people talking about Scottie Pippen. Well, you played with Jordan. Well, think about how awesome he was playing with Jordan. So when I think about Jaylen Brown playing with Jason Tatum, if this equates to NBA championships, how many guys wouldn't take that? There are plenty of guys who would take that. And for the idea of him leaving Boston, I think this is the best situation for him. Number 1, they're going to pay him the most. Number 2, he's got the best opportunity to be on a championship team and win an NBA championship. Number 3, he's in the best basketball situation. I mean, how many number 2s averaging 27 a game? And Joe, you had mentioned being an all NBA performer. I'm trying to think of 5 other guards in the NBA that are better than him, that are going to be on the all NBA team. Donovan Mitchell,
Dame,
Luka,
Dame, might get in.
Steph,
SGA, Fox.
Fox probably has to make it. SGA has to make it, in my opinion.
Jaylen Brown's played more minutes as small forward this year than shooting guard. I don't know. You know how the NBA is. You know, they could be labeled.
Now, OG, this is a question for you because I'm actually curious where you stand on it. If you were voting all NBA between Jaylen Brown and James Harden, who are you going with?
Jaylen Brown. Even though James Harden is leading the league in assists. And I think that those 2 guys, I think they have similar roles on their team, how effective they are and how important they are to their unit. James Harden leading the league in assists and what he brings to that team offensively. But when I think about what Jaylen Brown brings to that team, I mean, 27 and 6 and what he does on the defensive side of the ball and how effective he's been, and the fact that Boston has been at the top of the Eastern Conference the entire season, it's difficult for me to believe that this guy isn't an all-league performer. I don't know. I'm thinking about in the past a number 2 that's averaged 27 a game that wasn't an all-league performer. The only guy that I can remember that was a number 2, that was Bryant.
Yeah,
that was an all-league performer. And I think about Steph Curry, how awesome he was with Kevin Durant. And I don't think Steph Curry averaged 27 a game as a number 2.
Was Amari an all-league performer?
Amari Stoudemire with the Suns.
Not only was he an all-league performer, he was first team All-NBA.
He was.
Yeah,
okay.
But there wasn't a second guy on that team that averaged more than that. Steve Nash was like an 18 and 10 guy.
Got it. But I know that Nash was the MVP. So I know that Stoudemire, though, he was the more.
There have been 4 duos to average 27 points per game or more in the season. 1965 Lakers with Jerry West and Elgin Baylor. 2001 Lakers with Shaq and Kobe. 2003 Lakers with Shaq and Kobe. And the 2020 Rockets with Harden and Russell Westbrook.
AD and LeBron didn't average because he averaged 25. Was it 25 that year?
I think
Yeah,
AD got 24.
AD averaged 26. James averaged 25.
That's what it was.
League assists. Now, Jaylen Brown's eligible at forward. He's not eligible at guard. I want to make that clear. Because the last 2 years, he has not been more of a guard. He's actually played some minutes at power forward. And so it's not a question of him versus Halliburton, Fox, and all those guys. It's a question of Jimmy Butler versus Jaylen Brown. Jimmy's played 3 less games. He's been more efficient, but Jaylen's on an actual good team, let alone the number 1, number 2 seed in his conference. So I think that's the bigger question here.
Okay.
So in terms of the forwards, so you named one, Jimmy Butler. Who else will be the forwards?
Giannis, James, Jimmy Butler,
Tatum.
Sabonis.
Wants to be 5.
Sabonis. Does he go before Siakam? I
Yes.
think he does.
I think he does.
Yep. Yeah.
Does he go? Does he go before Laurie Markkinen?
Yes.
Yes, he does go
Big
before
He
Markkinen.
does.
He does go.
If
No,
we're
no,
going
he
to
does.
criticize
He does.
Jaylen Brown's playmaking, what does Laurie Markkinen do as a
it's
playmaker?
not.
So
Fair enough.
I think I do. I think Jaylen Brown is an All NBA performer.
Yeah,
should
he's
be
at the
the
forward
best
spot for sure. The guard one is a little. It's up
It
in the
is
air.
tough.
There's
But
a
he's-
lot of really good guards.
With Rob,
in the league.
with Rob missing so many games, it's been Smart, White, Tatum, and Brown, and Al at the 5. So he's been playing much more forward than guard this year.
Yeah, I know that Dehls has this curse going around that whenever he buys a jersey of a player
it's real.
and the player ends up leaving, he has a lot of Jaylen Brown shirts. I don't know if that
One
counts.
Jaylen Brown.
Do you?
It's honestly just the Jets. If we're being completely honest with each other, it's really just the Jets. I have Le'Veon, Jamal Adams. I had a Favre jersey.
Elijah
Matt
Moore.
Forte, Elijah Moore. Thank you.
Oh, Matt Forte, you did it.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
we
it's
started
facts.
to see Tatum become his most inconsistent this season when Joel.
I was gifted the jersey. I
Shit.
thought I was in the clear with gifted. But thankfully Tatum's been more efficient these last 2
He
games.
has, he
Last
has.
comment on Jaylen Brown, I will say, it is, I think, an easy fix if I'm Brad Stevens, because the NBA, if you guys aren't aware, you can do a no trade clause, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
if Jaylen Brown is worried about constantly being in these trade rumors, constantly having the media spin up these narratives about him, I think it's pretty easy for Brad Stevens to say, listen, we want you on the Celtics for the next 5 years. We do not want to trade you. We are giving you a no trade clause. So even if something happens years down the road, we want you to have that security. No, we are not looking to move you.
I don't know. I think that's more so reserved for a player like Bradley Beal. Right.
You think so? Can't do that,
Dale,
Jaylen Brown.
I'm surprised, Dale, that you let Joe off the hook with the Knicks logic, because if I'm not mistaken, did
Can't
the
take
Knicks
this guy
not
serious.
make the playoffs 2 years ago and everybody was loving Julius Randle? Was Julius Randle not on the trade block last year?
He was
Just 1 year after they make the playoffs, everybody's loving Julius Randle. Now all of a sudden they don't make the playoffs. Get Julius Randle out of town. How long before Jaylen Brown is in New York before y'all ready to run him out of town?